Thank you once again for joining. We're going to go ahead and get started. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin our session today. You may notice that your mics are muted, and so you won't be able to unmute until the end. We will have time at the end of the session for questions, and we will open our chat dialogue, and you will have an option to raise your hand using the controls on Teams, and we'll unmute your mic at that time. So please just jot your questions down as we go through our presentation. And again, we will hold the questions until the end of the session. We will, as I mentioned, the meeting chat will be opened during the question time at the end, and we are recording the session today. So good news is if you forget something or you want to come back to it at a later time or share it with a friend who maybe couldn't join, we will have the meeting link available to you. Next slide, please. So hopefully you know why you're here, but we are today, the NDSP team and your school liaison office is here to present to you and also to hear questions from you about transitioning from your location in the UK. And I'll be joined by several members of the team. My name is Erica McCoy. I'm the program manager for the non-DoD schools program. I am not going to be speaking to you much today, which is nice, but you won't have to hear too much from me. But you will be hearing from our expert team members from a variety of disciplines, our program management team, our resource management, as I mentioned, your school liaison officer, education specialist, and our program specialist who will speak about transition specifically. Next slide. Few of the items that we'll discuss today. And again, you'll be hearing from our respective team members on a variety of topics from PCSing to program management concerns, financial considerations, educational considerations, and then again, a few notes from your school liaison officer. And with that said, I will transition it over to Mr. Robert Downs. Thank you once again for joining. We really appreciate your time today.
Morning, folks, or good afternoon, I might say. So if you're going to, at this period of transition, if you were transitioning to another overseas NDSP assignment location, there's a process to follow on that. Essentially, you start all over again, like your first time you registered for the NDSP by, navigating to the student online registration portal and creating a new application for the system, new orders, new eligibility determination, and if that's the case for you, then we can certainly get you pointed in the right direction that way. If you're transitioning to another overseas location where there's a DoDEA school, then of course that's going to have to be your first choice right there. But the link's down here for the DoDEA registration site. And if by chance your tour is going to be ever extended, then just keep in mind that you're going to have to provide some documentation to us to reflect that extension of your time there in the overseas area. And for any questions about these type subjects, just don't hesitate. Just reach out to the NDSP management team, and all that contact information will be on the info page at the back of this presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Lori Edom. Sorry about that. I am the NDSP Resource Management Chief, and I'm going to begin my comments with the most important reminder for you. It's critical to know your school and your bus contract requirements for withdrawal. If proper notification isn't provided, the school can charge a terms fee in lieu of notice, and our UK schools often apply that practice. So where to begin? Initially, you need to notify the school. You'll also need to notify the NDSP the last day your schools will be attending classes. Don't forget that you'll also need to notify your service providers, especially the transportation service. We had one transportation that went to knock on a door and the house was empty. The family forgot to notify the bus. So please don't forget your transport. Once you notify the NDSP of your PCS date and the last date your child will be attending classes, this could make a difference between whether we pay a full annual invoice or whether we actually just pay, up to that last term. So please don't forget to notify the school, your service provider, and the NDSP. If by chance you're a T22 and you know who you are, SAO or FMS, don't forget to notify your local finance command. It's responsible to paying your tuition payments. They're going to need to know that too. Next slide. So next you'll want to seek tuition refunds if applicable. The NDSP usually pays the invoices annually, so any early withdrawals may be subject to a refund. Notify the NDSP Europe invoices box, and we'll have our NDSP refunds team spring into action to provide that refund guidance to your school. Don't forget, if you paid a refundable deposit at the beginning of your tour, these deposits will be returned to you, not the NDSP. Next slide. It's important to reconcile any outstanding payments with the school and the NDSP to include transportation and service providers. While we will take outstanding claims even after you've departed the location, we ask that you clear all these prior to you leaving the country. Please ensure that we have forwarding addresses for you. You can update your forwarding address with the liaison and or the sponsor portal. It'll reflect there as well. And I'll complete my comments where I began by reminding you that it's critical to know your school and bus contract requirements for withdrawal to avoid any out-of-pocket penalty costs. And with that, I'll send this over to Amy.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Amy Griffin. I'm an education specialist, and I'm here in the United Kingdom. And I'm going to share with you about some primary education considerations today. Having lived now in the UK, many of you will understand that there are clear differences between education here in England compared to the United States or other areas of the world. For example, one of the first key things that families realize transitioning into the UK is that there are differences with educational stages, the year level versus the grade level. You can see on the chart on this slide that if your child is in year 3 here in the UK, they will be age appropriate for 2nd grade in the United States. This is a small detail, but it's critical to point this out to the US school to ensure they understand that the number associated with the year level does not directly translate to a grade level in the US, so that your child's appropriately placed upon entering the next school. Another difference is that curriculum expectations in England are different, and you all probably are aware of this after living here. In the primary grades, this has a large impact, especially in the early years. For example, right at about 90% of the English national curriculum expectations for reading instruction, especially and specifically phonics for 5 to 6-year-olds, line up with our US first grade expectations of our students. And US first graders are age 6 to 7, not 5 to 6. So there's about a year's difference there. And in the primary years, reception through year 6, you can anticipate that the expectations of students here in the UK are ahead about 6 months to a year, depending on the subject, skill, and year level for the student. The closer students get to the year to year 6, the less of a difference there is in the curriculum expectations for foundational skills. Most families find the transition into the UK harder than the transition back to the US or other locations when it comes to curriculum in the early years. So hopefully you'll find that to be true as well if you have younger children. If anyone would like a copy of the English National Curriculum expectations at each year level from the early years foundation stage to year 6, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'll happily send you a copy if that's helpful. When you transition to a new location, please make sure you request your child's records from the school before you leave. Have a copy easily accessible physically within your luggage or easy access to a digital copy. Your child's records might include an official letter or a transcript from the school, which shows records of attendance, academic information, and grade placement of your student. If they have finished a key stage and have official testing records, keep a copy of these as well. However, if you feel your child's term report or the key stage testing record lacks sufficient detail for someone to understand the marks, you may want to ask your child's teacher or school to draft a simple letter providing more detail to help the U.S. school understand the grading system or the assessment scores. When you transition to your next location, don't hesitate to reach out to your school liaison officer. If you run into any difficulties with the transition to the new school, if you have questions or you need some support from outside of the school, they're extremely helpful, supportive, and well-connected to other agencies and programs. I'll drop a link for the school liaison program into the chat at the end in case that's helpful to anybody and they want to reference it later and look up the liaison for your next location. Also, the last item to highlight here on this slide is that, and many of you may be familiar with it already, is Military OneSource. If not, it's a helpful tool that has access to a lot of resources in one place, webinars, videos for children that focus on issues children face, such as moving. There's toolkits, connections to outside agencies, depending on the area of need. It's just a plethora of information. So I'll also drop that in the link in case it's helpful to anyone. Okay, next we're going to talk about children with additional needs and things to consider for your upcoming move. Children with additional needs might include children receiving gifted education or enrichment support, English as a second or other language support, children receiving interventions, which may or may not include a learning plan at their school. And it will also include children who have an individual education plan, also referred to as an IEP, a 504 accommodation plan, or a school-based plan, such as a learning plan. However, please note that learning plans at British schools, although they may be called a variety of things, could be action plan, my plan, learning plan. Sometimes they even call them IEPs like we do in the United States. However, not all children with a learning plan are considered to have special education needs like they would be considered in the United States. Sometimes British schools have these plans for a variety of reasons, enrichment sometimes, language acquisition, interventions, just to name a few. And for some students, they may even have something that goes beyond a learning plan, such as an education, health, and care plan, an EHCP. And this is provided by the local authority when a child cannot, when the child's school cannot meet their needs, and so they have to have additional help. So lots of different reasons students might now be receiving services here in the UK, but let's look at a couple of educational things to consider before you move if they are receiving some additional assistance. If your child has any kind of additional need, there should be a record of it with the school. You'll want to ask the school for an updated copy of their learning plan, recent assessment results, and progress reports. Many of the British schools do their own screenings as well for dyslexia and learning difficulties. So it'd be good to ask for a copy of this to have on file as well when you go to move if this has occurred. Additionally, make sure you have their most recent evaluation and assessment reports from the school. Again, keep the records handy digitally or in your luggage so you have it when you land there in the next location. If your child does have a US-based IEP or 504 plan with our office and you want to update it before you leave, please make sure to reach out to me to ensure I have the updated information, and so we can discuss the plan to update your child's document before you leave and make sure we have an accurate reflection of what they need and what's been occurring here in the UK for them. Transition considerations. It's important to talk with your children before the move. Let them share their concerns and questions. Make time for this. Discuss strategies that might help them specifically transition to a new school. Some ideas that other families have used in the past include requesting an early visit to the new school before orientation or the first day of school. So basically before the hustle and bustle of everyone else showing up, requesting an opportunity maybe to introduce your child to their teacher before the school year begins. Both of these kinds of items can ease a child's anxiety just to kind of calm things down if they're feeling anxious before they actually start school in that new location. I've even had a family print out teacher pictures off the new school website in advance to give to their child as a cheat sheet before the first day of school. And it was really helpful to them and it helped them feel better prepared for that first day of school. So lots of possible strategies, but you'll want to think about what would most help your child. Consider talking to your child's current teacher for suggestions on what they think would help your child with the transition. You may also want to consider asking your child's current teacher to write a letter of introduction to the new teacher as a friendly way to highlight your child's needs and strengths. This is often a more personable approach to introducing a student with additional needs to their new teacher. If your child has an IEP, a 504 plan, or an EHCP, it'll also be critical that you reach out in advance to let the new school know and inquire about a meeting to review their incoming plan and discuss your child's needs. Do note if your child became eligible for special education while in the UK, it's important to know that special education in the United States is different than here in England with different laws and requirements. If you reach out, I'd be happy to schedule time to visit with you about the differences and what to expect when you arrive in the US. That third point is referring to a one-page profile. This can provide a snapshot of your child's needs. There are a couple examples here on this slide that you can take a look at. Many schools here in the UK already do these, but if not, consider putting one together for your child if they have additional needs. These are fairly easy to do, and there are a lot of examples and templates now available online. Hopefully you can see from the example on the slide, a one-page profile typically includes a child's strengths, what works for them in their learning environment, what doesn't work for them, possibly a vision statement for you as a family for your child and what they're passionate about. This often comes off in a more reader-friendly way than the IEP documents. Of course, the IEP documents are still provided, but this can almost be like a cover page to the IEP. And I've included a link on this slide here so that you can see where to find more information about this. I'm also going to drop that in the links at the end if that's helpful to anyone. EFMP. If your child is a US-based IEP, notifying the Exceptional Family Member Program is a requirement. Don't hesitate, though, to reach out to me if you need assistance with this or if you need updated EFMP paperwork for the move, education EFMP paperwork. I'll also include a link in the chat for the EFMP for that program in case you are needing to get that started. And then last, as a final note, please, please, please feel free to reach out to me at any time to discuss the transition and special considerations for your child's situation. For example, if your child has a learning plan, but you've never reached out to our office, consider doing this just to chat about options, considerations for transferring the plan to possibly an IEP or 504 plan to help you be best prepared for your child, to have them best prepared for the move and be ready to be received in the US school or your next location. And with that, I am going to transition now to Dr. Smalls to talk about secondary education considerations.
Thank you, Amy. I wanted to just highlight a few points that parents with secondary students, specifically high school, should consider. One of the things that I always recommend to parents is to be proactive. The moment that you know your PCS date and your new location, you should contact the receiving school to go ahead and plan your child's transition. This may look like contacting the registrar or the school counselor, letting them know that you're coming. After you contact the school and speak with them, then I recommend connecting the school counselors from the school you're leaving with the school counselor or registrar at the school who you are going to, where your child will be going, to work out any concerns. While you're connecting them, definitely you should be sharing paperwork that consists of your child's transcripts, any test scores that they have, anything that's relevant to what occurred with their education while they were there in the UK. Next slide, please. During this time, it'll be helpful because this can help determine if your child will need supplementary coursework or supplemental coursework prior to leaving the NDSP. Amy already spoke about the differences in the UK system versus the US system, and we all know that there are certain courses that they don't offer in the UK or that may not be accepted in the United States, courses like US history or government or civics. So if your child is at a certain grade level and you don't want them to have to add any additional courses or take summer school courses or after school courses, and you find out that these are courses that they may need so that they can be on target for their placement, you can speak with Amy and get authorization for supplemental coursework. But please be mindful that once you leave NDSP, we cannot fund supplemental coursework. So that's why it's so important as soon as you find out to go ahead and get your students registered in that information. Another thing that's not on the slide that is possibly helpful is to request transcript evaluations. This is mostly when you're connecting with your receiving school and they may have questions or you may not agree with where they place your child. You can get a professional transcript evaluation and they'll let you know based on, I guess, their their understanding of everything, and that may make it better for you to explain to the school where you feel that your child should be placed or which courses they should have received credits for. But note that the receiving school has the final authority and they do determine where your child lands. If you need any additional information, you can ask questions at the end in the question and answer session, or you can contact us with additional questions. And so now I'm going to turn it back over to Amy, I think.
We are going to open it up to Veronica Garza, the SLO at Crowton. I'm going to let you go ahead and take it from here, and then it'll go back to Erica after.
Sounds good. Hello, everyone. My name is Veronica Garza, and I am your school liaison for Crowton, Fairford, and Wilford, and everyone in between. I am located on Crowton in Building 72. If you look on the slide, you see my contact information, my DSN number, my email address. You can contact me in either or. I always get back to you as soon as I can. I am here to answer any questions, support you, and just ease a transition because it's a lot to take in. So I'm here for anything you may need.
All right, thank you. Well, you've heard a lot from a very wide group of our team members, including your school liaison. You have lots of folks here who work with you in a variety of ways, either behind the scenes or right up front, and who you can talk to directly. And so on the screen, the last slide, you saw Veronica's contact information, and then on this slide, you'll see our different offices and how you can go about contacting us. Our website's always a good place to go as well. You can find out lots of information there, and our contact information is also available there. And so with that, we are going to go ahead and open it up for questions. We will open the chat. So if you want to use the chat as a means to post your question, that would be fine. If you would prefer, you can also just raise your hand and we can unmute your mic or at least disable or enable your mic, I should say, and then you'll have the option to speak and ask any questions that you might have.
Erica, in the meantime, there's a question in the chat box. It says, who specifically do we notify at NDSP when we have a date?
And by date, I guess we mean departure date. That would be our NDSP management.
That's right. And the that contact information is on the next page, previous page.
Prior, yeah. Maybe we should go back to that one.
Yes.
Just so that way. Sorry,
Yeah.
Amy. Go back.
So yeah, as soon as you know that you have a departure date, let us know. But of course, be sure to let the school know, let your transportation provider know. But yeah, just send an email to the ndsp.management mailbox and we'll acknowledge that.
All right. And the next was a hand up from Scott.
Yeah, I already enabled your mic, Scott. So you'll just have to, you have to actually unmute yourself, though. I can't do it for you. So next to your name, there should be an option for you to unmute your mic. And if that doesn't work, then maybe just post your question in the chat. Not sure if you're having some Teams difficulty. I know it's can be a little bit wonky.
Yes. And so while we wait for Scott, we'll go to the next question from Ashley. What if I do not know what school my children will be going to in the U.S.? I am going to a place that does not have a base.
Shannon, do you want to take that question? It's a
Oh,
transition question, or do you want to?
yes. Sorry, I had technical difficulties. Yes. Most of the time, you do have to register with the local school district, and they'll tell you which school your child will be going to. So normally, you do have to consult with they call it central office or district office, and they'll tell you where your child is placed. I know most times it's determined based on your address or school lottery or that type of thing. So you would just get in touch with the local school district where you're going.
I think Scott was saying that it wasn't giving the option to unmute the mic. I'm not sure why Teams is not behaving.
Okay.
But we don't have the option to unmute mics,
No.
unfortunately.
I've tried as well.
Yeah, no, I know. You can only disable. So if you could just post your question in the chat, we can try.
Oh,
Okay, see it there. Go ahead. You want to read it, Shannon?
sure. He said, I think my question was answered. In short, when the child will no longer attend an NDSP school, then we email the NDSP management to inform them.
Robert, do you want to make any other notes about that?
No, other than to say, just to reiterate, be sure you let the school know as soon as you know that you're going to be leaving. The same with the transportation provider, but just an email to us and we'll acknowledge that.
Yeah, and I think just to underscore that it's not just it's a kind of a two separate process, right? It's notifying our team about your departure so that we can note your record, but really, really, really important for financial considerations is making sure that you're following what's in the contract of the school. And so, as Lori mentioned earlier, and I think you probably heard it several times, whatever the school requires, often it's one term prior to your departure, and they usually require it to be in writing. So even if you've seen Mr. or Mrs. So and so in the hallway and you mentioned, hey, don't forget we're leaving. Unfortunately, we know from a lot of
From
not so good
experience,
experiences that that is
yeah,
not sufficient, even though they may acknowledge it and you say, okay, I know I said it, I know you acknowledged it, but we've heard time and time again, and as Lori mentioned, especially in your locations, that the schools are very specific about it being in writing, and generally it's one term prior to your departure. So just be sure to review your contract for your school. Ask, your school front office if you're not sure. But as Robert mentioned, making sure that the school is notified as soon as possible, and then also making sure our office is notified.
Okay, and the next question, Ashley, let's see. Well, before that, Jen asked about Amy's contact information, and she did drop it in the chat. You can reach her at ndsp.education.europe, and she'll get whatever information you need sent to you. So Ashley says if there ends up being extra charges from trips, etc., can those still be sent in for payment, or will we need to pay and be reimbursed?
And Shanna, I can take that. This is Lori Edom. It it depends. There are, generally speaking, overnight trips are not reimbursable. However, if there is an educational component of those trips, then it can be submitted for review to see if there are any type of reimbursable fees that we can pay based on the educational curriculum portion of the trip. You will, depending on your timeline, and when you do leave, you may need to submit payment directly to the school and then submit a sponsor claim for reimbursement to us. Or if the school invoices us directly, we can pay directly for allowable fees. To be safe, go ahead and pay the school so that you're not leaving the location with any outstanding payments or outstanding fees due to the school, because it's difficult to try and hunt people down when we don't have a forwarding address for them or the school doesn't have a forwarding address. So if you know you're about to leave, go ahead and reconcile all those outstanding payments with the school and then submit a sponsor claim form with us, and we will pay those allowable fees on your behalf to you.
Okay, our next question is from Scott. Our daughter will be graduating and attending college in the States. So, do we need to inform NDSP, or if the notification intended for folks PCSing? I'll let Robert take that, but I think the answer is yes, you always need to inform NDSP. Am I correct, Robert?
Yeah, we do want you to just keep us in the loop. If your tour is extending is ending, we're going to see that on our end, but it's always good to know from you, if you are in fact leaving. And if you've been in the system for any amount of time, you'll note, like during re-registration, if you don't re-register in a timely manner, you're going to start getting bombarded with emails from our system to please go and re-register. And giving us that heads up will allow us to go in, plug in a date so you don't get bombarded with those email messages anymore.
And since his daughter will be a 12th grader, you wouldn't see that
Right.
happening. So I think our system,
True.
when all things are working, because you mentioned your daughter's graduating, which means as long as we have her recorded properly in our system as a 12th grader, then you really wouldn't have any true obligation to notify us that you're leaving, because our system would note that she would no longer be eligible because of
Yeah.
her grade level. So I think good question. We would love to know where she goes next. I mean, that's one thing we
Yeah.
haven't really incorporated into our departing families and really finding out. We are interested though. So if you're open to share, we'd love to celebrate that with you all. But as far as notification, I think you're spot on. We're really talking about people who are PCSing. But the minority who have actual graduating as seniors, as long as we have your child's grade level accurate in our system, which you should know by being able to look at this, your sponsor, your SOAR portal, you'll be able to see that the grade level is correct. So I hope that answers that question.
Yes, and congratulations to her in advance.
Yeah.
All right,
Good deal.
Philly has a question. Sometimes orders and dates aren't always given to us a term in advance. What happens if we give notice as soon as we know, but it is not enough time for a contract requirement? We still do not have our orders/dates yet. Will we be liable for the remaining term fees?
So I can answer that. We know that orders come in late sometimes, and it is what it is. If it's a situation that you come down in orders at the last minute, we're not going to hold you liable for any of those fees. So no, you would not be liable for those fees. Just let us know as soon as you know that you're going to be departing.
And what I would say to that, because we can't control what the school does, though. So I do want to make sure that we are as open and honest with you about this whole process, because it is a trying situation. We've really tried very hard to work with the schools, and I know Veronica has done the same locally. We really hope that they would be, understanding. Some schools are more understanding than others. I would say a few things to just caveat that. So let the school know in writing as soon as you know. That's really, really important. It's equally important that you let us know. And then if the school still charges fees, because again, we really can't control if the school is willing to waive those fees, we hope that they would, recognize that you've given them, that you just found out, for example, maybe you didn't get any advance notification about your departure, so forth and so on. So what we would need in the situation where the school does still charge the fees, we would need to see evidence that you have indeed provided the school in writing, with your notification of your departure, with the orders, and then we would have to process that as an exception. And the reason for that is because while we really understand, we can't control if the school does or doesn't. We will try to advocate on your behalf with the school, of course, but then internally, our leadership has to approve our ability to pay those fees. This particularly is really, really important if it's a situation where maybe you have re-registered and you've told the school that you're going to return for the following school year because maybe you didn't know that you were going to PCS. And then somehow in June or July you find out that, oh no, we're not actually going to be staying in this location, we have to depart. Schools will then charge the first term fees of the following school year. The challenge in that situation is, one, we can't control, again, the school, but because you technically would not be eligible for an allowance for that following school year because you won't be in that location, we have to process that request as an exception to policy. So I don't want to scare anyone, but I did want to be as thorough and just so we all understand the ramifications. We know that it's not what outside of your control. The only thing that's within your control is as soon as you have those orders, being very sure to notify the school in writing, making sure you keep a copy of that so that you can also show that to us as evidence, because that's our mechanism to be able to, you know, take care of the fees to the degree that we can. So I hope that answers the
Erica,
question.
I'd also like to just make one comment.
Yeah.
If you know that your DROS is going to be in July or your DROS will be in August, but you don't have your orders, please go ahead and let the school know that you are subject to PCS this summer. Just because you don't necessarily know where you're going or that you had those orders, please understand you know that the DROS is scheduled. So that's, as Erica mentioned, let the school know in writing and provide that information. And if for some reason you do get an extension, ensure that you get us those extension paperwork quickly via the sponsor portal, and Robert will record that extension date for you.
And for extenuating circumstances, it happens because we realize
Absolutely.
that in this, kind of stress where you're waiting on orders, you have a DROS, but you're not really sure. Meanwhile, the school is saying, but we need to know if your kid's coming back next year, they won't have a seat. We realize that all these things are happening and you feel
That's
like
right.
you're kind of the cream inside of the Oreo, trying to figure out which way is up, and you want to make sure your child has a seat. So contact us and we can work through this with you as much as possible. Of course, contact your SLO, who's right there locally. We can see, depending on the school, some of them are very forgiving and really will work with you. Others can be a little bit more, challenging, maybe because they have wait list and other considerations, and they too have decisions to make too about space and all that. So anyway, we didn't mean to go on and on, but this is a big topic. It comes up quite a bit, and it's particularly in the UK, it can be a little bit more challenging because the schools can be a bit more bureaucratic than we would like for them to be. I don't mean to say that in any kind of disparaging way. We love our schools and they work with you and providing great education, but when it comes to the business rules, it can be a little bit tough. So
All right. Our next question is from Jen. Are there any additional steps necessary if we're leaving NDSP due to retirement versus PCSing?
I think the same rules apply, right? Notifying us as soon as you know, and the school, the same thing. There are some, maybe extenuating circumstances that need to be considered. So, like when you're retiring, for example. So, if you have an early in the school year retirement, like an October retirement, one thing that we would require is that you go ahead and ask the school for a prorated invoice, because you're only we're only able to pay through that date. So it would be really prudent not to wait until after the date to let us know, things like that. So just be really sure to keep us abreast of those situations and the date, and obviously working with the school. So we can certainly advise you based on when in the school year the retirement is occurring, so that we can best advise what your next steps should be with us and with the school, so that there aren't any out-of-pocket funding implications that you're not prepared for.
Awesome. There don't appear to be any more questions, but I did want to note that Amy dropped the links in the chat box that she mentioned when she was presenting. And so you can access that information there. It's information about the SLOs, Military One Source, the one-page profile examples, and the EFMP program.
Well, with that, I think we can sign off. Are there any other parting notes from our team or from Veronica?
We just want to thank everybody for coming in and sharing this time with us, because it's really important that we educate you, and that if you do have any questions, we certainly want, especially financial in nature, make sure you reach out to me, Lori Edom, or to Sean Mullins, who is your financial analyst. So we're more than happy to assist. Thank you, Erica.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep. Thank you to all those who presented today. I appreciate that. And thanks everyone for attending.